Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a problem. Our problem is that at the moment in Estonia we're producing too much fossil fuels. As we can see, that the European Union demands all the member states to reduce 80% all the fossil fuels and all the exhumed gases that derive from them. What we see is that we're not really looking in our country a really sustainable and a really efficient solution. We're trying to find a solution from the renewable energy, and we see it's not really bringing us anything that literal and anything sufficient that we could see that would solve the problem with our energy. On the proposition side, we have a plan. We would build in Estonia three smaller level nuclear plants. We would not we would scatter them around around the country. We would not build one big major, just massive nuclear station. What we would do is, firstly, we would remove the risk of security by building three, not just one big nuclear station, because if you build three, what happens if, maybe for instance, if one would go out of service, then we could just use the rest of the two, and which would not work continuously on full power. I will hereby move to our first argument, which is efficiency. Firstly, what we see is that renewable energy is not really beneficial for us. We see that it's consistently very expensive to sustain. It needs constant maintenance, and it constantly needs new infrastructure to provide us with sufficient energy. What we see with our plan, by building three smaller nuclear power plants, we see that we would just need one bigger investment, and we can already get this necessary finances from the financiation that we put into renewable energy at the moment. We can see, and even if we can't get the funds and the financiation from there, we could take loan, because Estonia at the moment does not have any big debt or something that would stop us from doing that. As we can see, there isn't really a big risk of some sort of a massive catastrophe or something, because firstly, the kind of nuclear power plant we would build is the new thorium-based power plants and reactors that literally do not have the risk of meltdowns or explosions, because the way they're functioning just eliminate them, because that's chemistry. Secondly, we can see that the problem in Estonia, which is a relatively small country, we have a problem with land. We do not have that much land. We can use, by building these three small power stations, we don't need to build some sort of massive, we don't need to take away massive areas of land, like by building some sort of a wind power plants or something with water energy that also destroy the environment. We see that by building these three small plants, we take up relatively little bit of land, and we could actually produce a lot more energy. And from here I will move to our second argument, which is the economical benefits that derive from the building of these power plants. But as we can see, in the end, the consumer would have a cheaper product, because firstly, as I already said in our first argument, building and constructing the renewable energy plants is really expensive, and they need constant maintenance. As our statistics says that the renewable energy power plants, they cost up to $3,000 to $8,000 per kilowatt, but as we can see, the nuclear power plants only cost $2,000 for the consumer. In the end, people would have more money in their pockets. They could pay more taxes to the state by not paying it to electricity. Secondly, as we can see, we could make even more profits by selling the energy, which we can't do right now, because the energy that we produce is not literally enough. And also, we can see if we sell this energy to some neighboring countries like Latvia or Lithuania, we could actually make profit. And even if the buying of nuclear fuels would cost us a lot of money, we could still get the money back by selling the energy, and would still zero out the cost, and literally even more possibly, we could make actually profits out of it. Plus, they can't come. The opposition can't tell us that it's very inefficient for a small country like Estonia, because we already have examples from Europe like Slovenia and Slovakia that have used the same logic that we on the proposition side use, and thus they have built themselves small nuclear power plants that produce sufficient energy and bring profit to the country. Thank you.
We think that we should always prefer renewable energy over nuclear energy, as nuclear energy is unsafe for our energy safety all over, and it's unsafe for our people, it's expensive, and it fits the right wing an easy way to come into power, which we don't really like in our society. I will talk about three things in my speech. I'll talk about the energy safety overall. Second, I will talk about the problem with producing the nuclear energy, and third, I will talk about the right-wing politics. But first off, I will do two quick rebuttals, right? Okay, they said that they will build 3 smaller level nuclear plants without ever saying how much it will cost. We're saying that it's actually quite expensive to build these power plants. We saw that it's going to take 4 to 9 billion years just to build one reactor, and we think that building 3 would be actually quite expensive, and we don't see how we will get that money after all. And secondly, they're all the second argument said that there will be an economic benefit. We think that the premise of that argument is that we can actually build those plants, and in my speech I will just tell you how we're not going to get those plants, right? Okay, so first off, the energy safety, right? We think that it puts our national energy plan into danger when we're going to build those power plants. The main principle of energy safety is that you will have as many sources as possible of energy, and preferably your own sources, right? But how will we get this fuel for the plant, right? We will have to buy it somewhere else, right? It will mainly be Russia and Kazakhstan and Canada, right? Firstly, they don't have many leftovers, right? We won't have enough fuel for those nuclear plants after all. And secondly, even if they do have those this fuel, right? We don't want to put our we don't want to put our main source of energy into Russia's hands. We don't want to have Russia just whenever just cut off our energy, like they have. When they have even done the gas thing in Ukraine, right? So we think that putting our main effort into nuclear plants is really unsafe. Secondly, problems with producing the energy. Firstly, as I already talked about it, the cost of one energy plant is $4 to $9 billion. We don't really want to take a loan, as they said. We really don't want to take a loan, as it would just the government would have to raise the taxes, right? We will need to have to pay the loan back somehow. And secondly, our national budget is only 11 billion euros, right? We don't have the money right now also, so it's actually quite we really don't have that money, okay? Secondly, there is already a pattern of closing nuclear plants all over Europe, right? Germany closed their plants because they were ineffective, and secondly, not only the politicians see the plants as ineffective, the people also see it. Lithuanian people voted against nuclear plants in 2012, so the people also see it. So thirdly, the waste disposal, right? Where do we put the waste? We don't put it in Estonia, right? It's and it's really quite expensive. We will actually sell it to Africa or something, and then they will have to and then they will have to bury it, and it's still expensive, and we don't want to do those expenses. Fourthly, the safety of Estonians, after all. If anything would happen to the plant, the impact of it would be immense. like moreover, when we have 3 plants, it would be actually really bad. The radioactive pollution would quickly cover most of Estonia, as we're quite small, right? Making the country inhabitable after all. So we think that there are many problems with producing it. Okay. Thirdly, populism. The rise of populism would be coming soon, right? Firstly, it's really unsafe, as we have seen already with Fukushima, right? Secondly, it's expensive, as I already said. And we see that the people already are against the power plants. Before Fukushima accident, there were already talks about building a power plant in Estonia, but immediately after that, they were stopped after the accident, right? Because people felt the danger. And secondly, we live in a former Soviet country. People remember the Chernobyl accident, and so people don't really want those nuclear plants. So therefore, we already have a basis for the people who are against it. And now a right-wing party would, the populist party, would already use the people's negativity and easily rise to power, and we don't really want those people in our governments. Thank you.
So the question from the proposition side, as you said, we would somehow become dependent from Russia or Kazakhstan, but we don't really see how. Once we have bought the necessary materials to build the reactor, we can put them in place, we can put them into action, and they will work, and we no longer need to buy any sort of material to build or to make them run.
Thank you for the question. We think that it's actually quite wrong. We will still need some fuel to run the plants on. The plants can't just run off air or lava. We still need some chemical materials or something in those plants to put them in power and to get some energy from them.
Okay. Thank you for the question.
Where do we actually get the money from to buy those plants? I brought you the statistics how the plants are going to cost really much, and you're saying also that these plants will use some new chemicals. How do we get the money?
Firstly, as I already explained in my speech, we have countries in Europe, such as Slovenia and Slovakia, that are not the best of countries economically around the Eurozone and around the economic zone of Europe. But even those countries were capable of building this. As we know, Slovenia isn't the richest country in Europe. But as I also explained, we can take a loan if we really need to, but it will most likely not be necessary because we already have the resources to probably build a small level nuclear station.
Thank you for asking.
And the second question, I have a question. Should we build Rail Baltic? Because you say that the economic, some sort of economical risk, and we have this environmental risk. But maybe we should just all ride around with bicycles instead of Rail Baltic and trains.
We think that the analogy between Rail Baltic and a big nuclear plant is really not right, because Rail Baltic isn't going to explode, or Rail Baltic isn't going to actually harm our air as much as a nuclear plant would, even if there are no explosions, right? We don't think there is going to be such a bad of a backlash from Rail Baltic rather than a nuclear plant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, even if it is going to be safe, right? How do we explain it? How do we explain the safety to the people in the end?
We can explain it to them. Even if we can't really explain them how it's completely safe, we can tell them that the prices will go a lot lower than they are with renewable energy. Thus, people will start to support it. We can already see it from the examples of Slovenia and Slovakia. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
by European Union policy, we must cut the waste and the greenhouse gases by 80% for the year 2050. But they haven't given us any mechanisms on how we can do that with renewable energy, how it's going to pan out, and what is their comparison. Tom told you nothing about everything about that. They completely ignored our problem, which is actually a big problem, because if we don't fulfill that requirement in the European Union, we could be in a very bad place, in the European Union, but which we would want to be in, because the European Union is crucial for Estonia's economy and for us to go forward in a good way. What they have done, though, is just nitpicked some little things that could happen, but haven't compared them to our actual benefits that come from them. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to rebut those nitpicks that they gave you and why these actually aren't true at all. So, what are these nitpicks? Firstly, about it being expensive. Firstly, we think that, as Christian asked, as answered, Slovenia and Slovakia have done it, and we don't see how Estonia couldn't do it. Also, they haven't given us a reason for that. They told us that if they could do it, we think that the price couldn't be as high, or we still can take loans. What they told about loans is that then we have to raise the taxes, and then it's very, very harmful for us. We think that why should it be like that in Estonia? Every other state in the world basically is taking loans, but Estonia's debt is minimal, is so small, and we haven't taken any loans since our independence. Estonia is very similar to Singapore, which was a small state in a very good area, where they could get very rich, and they became very rich because they took loans and invested them carefully, invested them smartly. And which would give them big economical benefits, which still come under our side, which Tom didn't answer once. And also, those economical benefits could be the ones that are going to pay for this plant. So this expensive talk is pointless. All right. Then they told us about us being dependent on Russia. They never told us why Russia should be the one that we should be dependent on. Firstly, we don't even think that this thorium, which we would use in power plants, come from Russia. For example, China already gave us a deal by which they would sell us this thorium. We think that being a little bit dependent on getting some resource from China wouldn't be as bad, because we already get many of our resources from China, many of our goods from China, which is very important to us. Being able to get thorium also from there wouldn't be as bad. So this being dependent thing is also not good. Okay, then about populism, we think that this point is very well answered with this Rail Baltic analogy. Tom told us that the Rail Baltic is comparable because it's not gonna explode. But what we see that the difference here actually is that Rail Baltic actually and definitely will take away your homes and will take away homes of the people. We think that but in comparison, the power plant, there is an extremely low chance that it will actually explode, that will actually do any harm to us, and I'll talk about that later in my extension. And then it told us that people don't like it because Germany already closed them because they were inefficient, and that Germany's plants were old, didn't use this thorium thing that we would use, and we think that the fact that somewhere they were closed doesn't mean that we should not use them. And then their final nitpick was about this waste. We think that we can see how this should be very important to us, because other states also many states use nuclear power. They have a place they could put the waste, but they haven't compared those states to Estonia. Why Estonia couldn't do the same that the other states are doing? Why is it important here? We don't know. Okay. But let's talk about the extension and comparison between our actual benefits. Okay, so about the catastrophes, we think that by statistics, the catastrophe likelihood is from 28 to 95% because of the statistical uncertainty. We think that this could vary from anywhere around there, but could be 28%, which would be very, very low and very good to us. Could be much higher, but we think that it should be somewhere in the middle there. But what is more important is, by the time we have those power plants, there's about 500 power plants in the world as a whole. This would mean that that power plant exploding in our country would be 0.6%, which is like a really low percentage. Also, like adding to that the fact that we are going to use the effective thorium that has an extremely low chance of actually this misfunctioning of actually doing those catastrophes being taking place. And if we compare that to all the benefits that they didn't answer and that they didn't deal with at all, and Karin will talk about more, then we should win this debate.
We completely do agree with the proposition's problem. We do need to cut the fossil fuels. That was our problem, and we think that it's important to lessen those fuels. But we are just going to do it with a more effective way, which isn't going to harm the people, which isn't going to harm the country's budget, and which is, after all, going to have a much better effect on the country. We are slowly moving towards renewable energy. We're seeing it happen in Estonia already, and we're planning on making it bigger and getting the most out of it. Now about their examples, which are also pretty nitpicked. Slovenia and Slovakia have done this thing. Very cool, but we don't have to do it. And as they said before, that those are economically very poor countries and they don't have, they're actually not great countries. Great, that's a prime example of why we shouldn't do it. They are not a good example of a country. And then they're going to tell us about how it's not going to cost that much, where we actually have statistics that tell that a normal nuclear plant would cost above $4 billion to $9 billion, and even more. They want to build 3 of them in Estonia. We think that this is a massive expense. Our national budget is only 11 billion, and I think that if we're going to triple that, we don't have the money and we don't have the resources. So we're going to need to lend from the EU. And the lending, what it does is it increases taxes, which are going to harm the poor people so much that they don't have the money to spend about that. So the money, we don't actually see the money coming from anywhere but from the loan that EU gives us. So then they're going to tell us about why Russia. Well, we can actually see that Russia holds the biggest deposit of uranium already, and Kazakhstan does the same. And Kazakhstan, as known, is very controlled by Russia. It's not a very Western country or state. So we can see that this is the most this is the best way to get uranium. And also, we already get our energy from Russia. We already buy energy from Russia. So we don't see why we shouldn't do it again. We don't see why we shouldn't buy uranium from them now that they're going to do it. And the risk is so big. Russia has done that already. Russia has cut ties with multiple countries before, including Estonia before the Second World War, when they closed some of the markets and Estonian people were poor after that. But it doesn't only include poverty here. This includes actually energy safety. We might not even get energy anymore, and people cannot depend on energy so much that this is a massive risk. We shouldn't take it. Then they're going to talk about the percentage. They're going to talk about the percentage of why this might be small and this is a very safe method without even explaining it. They're just going to tell us that this is a small percentage. But you know what? Fukushima had all the safety regulations. They did everything right, and it still was a massive catastrophe. People are going to look at that, and even if the percentage is that small, we can also see that people are still afraid. I mean, why are people afraid of flying? There aren't many plane accidents, but people are still afraid for their lives. And we can see the massive predicament that the country is going to be in when an actual nuclear explosion happens. We think that, especially with a country like Estonia, which is so small, we cannot risk it. We cannot take this risk. We cannot ever put our citizens under that. And then we're going to talk about Rail Baltic, and this is it isn't comparable at all. First, let's talk about the cost. Rail Baltic costs under like $1 billion dollars. And the nuclear state, as we told you, the statistics actually confirm that, cost like $4 billion at least, and they're gonna want to build 3 of them. And even if it does take away many homes, I think that if I have to pay my taxes triple, I think that's a much bigger problem than losing my house, which isn't even very, might not even happen. So, and for the final part, how do you explain it to the people that firstly, their taxes are gonna increase, secondly, people are going to see the massive risk coming with it. Even if the percentage is small, they're still afraid for their life. They're still afraid that something might happen to them. And I think this is one of the biggest problems. This is how politicians cannot explain it. And that's why like right-wing parties like EKRE take the chance and spin it off and tell them that they're not going to do it. They're not going to be the ones that put their lives under risk. And they're going to be the ones that save those people. And those people who have lived under Chernobyl and who know about Fukushima are the ones that can confirm it, and are the ones that are going to choose EKRE. So for all those reasons of why this is so dangerous and why they haven't debunked actually any of them, please choose opposition for this debate. Thank you.
Why will using renewable energy actually fill our needs when Christian analyzed you? Why it doesn't, and you haven't answered to it?
Well, we actually haven't seen his analysis. You just really thought of that on the spot. We haven't seen how he did it, what he actually said. He just said that it doesn't work, and he said that your plan is just chemistry, and we should understand it. So, now for my question. How exactly has it worked out for Slovenia and Slovakia?
Well, there hasn't been a catastrophe. People are poor from paying all those taxes, and all of those harms that you're giving to us. There isn't like waste lying around on main streets of cities. There isn't all of those harms that you have told us about haven't happened in Slovenia, Slovakia.
All right.
Why are people still flying airplanes if they're so scared?
Well, because that's the most efficient solution. But nuclear energy is not one of the most efficient solutions out there. We have alternatives. And for example, the planes are much better alternatives to buses than nuclear energy is to like renewable. So we think that is a bad comparison. So you told us about like Slovenia and Slovakia not having nuclear explosions, which we think is the worst case scenario, but how does it really work out economically? How is it in there? You said yourself that those countries are not really affluent economically.
Well, by the fact that it has worked out there is the answer to their question. We can take loans, as we told you, because we are not in debt, and we wouldn't have to like raise our taxes to sky high, because it doesn't happen like this in every other state in the world. And we think that we can pay for it like with the money we get from using more efficient energy sources and being able to sell it into other states.
All right.
Okay, why are you talking about risk for catastrophe if I've told you, and chemistry like proves it, that thorium that we would use, it literally has like a 0% possibility for failure, or for exploding?
Because, well, two things. Because Fukushima had no risk too, and it still happened. And secondly, the risk is really about the people. They're afraid of that. They're afraid of losing their homes. They're afraid of losing their relatives. They're afraid of losing everybody. It's not about like the risk itself. It's about the populist parties that spin it off. I think this is one of the most important problems with the risk. Moving on to my question. Oh God. Okay. Well, you talked about China in your speech quite a bit, and I just wanted to ask, why would China prefer like Estonia over Russia? Why wouldn't they start making deals with Russia?
Because firstly, they already have offered us a deal to sell us thorium, and secondly, they can do deals like sell their thorium to Russia and sell it also to Estonia, which wouldn't make us at all dependent on Russia, but we would be in close relations with China.
So
What we find the opposition here is doing wrong is that they acknowledge the problem. They see that yes, fossil fuels are bad, we should try to not use them as much, but they don't offer a solution. We have said from our first speech that we see that this renewable energy right now isn't just effective enough to solve this problem we are having. We have brought a good solution for this. We have said that if we build these small nuclear plants in Estonia, they could be ready in 2 or 5 years. They could solve this problem we've been having. So we find that it's much more effective than dairy, because dairy is actually really detrimental to the country, because as we have said, the EU has really strong restrictions on fossil fuels, and right now we are mainly depending on them. Right now, because these renewable energy sources aren't powerful enough, they aren't advanced enough, we can't use them as an alternative, but we could use this nuclear energy, and so we find by that it's the best solution to this problem. So let's talk about price here. We have said that right now Estonia is in a very good position. We don't have any loans, we're completely free. We have basically all the opportunity to do what we want. So if we would like to build some nuclear factories, we find that right now would be the best time to do it. We find that even though it might be expensive right now, in the long run it's better for us, because as I said, it's better for the environment, and secondly, we find that in our first speech we brought out statistics about this, that while renewable energy sources are $3,000 per kilowatt, nuclear sources are only 2,000. So we find that it's much less expensive, and by that point we already win some, because we can show the people that first of all it's not expensive, and second of all, if we educate people enough by showing them that this technique that we are using with thorium, which has a half-life while uranium has only 700 million years to disappear from the environment, thorium has only 300, and by that, if we educate people enough, they aren't afraid, and by that this populism point is also done. Okay, thanks.
Okay, first things first, the national energy security. They have never proven to us why China would prefer Estonia over Russia, the bigger client, which they are willing to please more and screw over the smaller client, and they are actually willing to just carry on with our trade deals fairly. And second of all, they have completely ignored the ideological lineup that they have with Russia, way more than they have with Estonia, which from which they would do that like screwing over mechanism way more than actually just for the benefits of it all. Even if it doesn't benefit them at all, they're willing to do it, and they have showed it in the past, giving like North Korea props and giving them arms, which is beneficial to them at all, but it does line up with their ideological like ideas and the overall things that they want to do. So we see that, yeah, they may offer us a deal right now, they may sell it to us right now, but that is not a very stable income of that all. So we see that they have completely lost the national security point. Second of all, they haven't won the far-right populism movement and those things. They just say that yes, we can educate people enough, and yes, they are not afraid to do it. But we see that they're very afraid. We see it in the examples of real life when they actually voted that they don't want the nuclear energy. When they have actually said that we are afraid of all those Chernobyl things, and they're not considering my grandma, their own grandmas, and our parents even, who remember Chernobyl way more than all these other things. They thought it's really clever to say that if you go on a plane, this completely ignores the fear part. It doesn't. When I go on a plane, it's a very small chance that I'm going to, that plane is going to crash. But I am still afraid. When I am afraid, I make choices differently. This plane crashing and my whole country blowing up is very two different fears, on which you will take two completely different considerations, and you will not vote on that. You will get angry, and all those other things will come. Thirdly, they have offered us this bulletproof, completely vetted and false plan of how they're going to do things. Carl just straight up lied to you about how this chemistry on their part is going to work with zero risk. It doesn't happen actually. It's smaller risk than compared to other nuclear plants. True, we concede, but it's still a risk. And when that risk is still high, all the things can come, people will still be afraid, yada yada yada. Secondly, what we see is that the plan on which they will build those three smaller plants, which will be based on plutonium and whatever, they will actually have to be buried. So when, like Losman said, that you actually have to put some fuel in the beginning, and you don't ever need to put fuel in again. That's not because it's going to work forever. That's just because it doesn't operate on the basis that there will be ever put any fuel in. When it runs out, you have to build a new one. So all those costs that we have talked about actually come much higher with their plan, because we have to pay much more when we want to build them again. So because they have just straight up lied to you, we should look. Thank you. Senator,
Yes.
Why do you say that we don't have the money to use nuclear energy when renewable energy is actually more expensive and takes a lot more money to maintain, in addition to not being as efficient?
We think that building a park for like those electrical, for the wind energy is going to be a lot cheaper. You have never said that actually how many times it's going to be like more expensive, so that I can say it's cheaper. Therefore, we think that people are like more acceptable to pay for like wind energy, where it's less dangerous than nuclear energy in the end also. Okay, so I will ask the next question. When Russia would knock on China's door and tell them not to sell Estonian nuclear power fuel anymore, why would China say no to Russia's question?
In order for us to be able to answer this question, you have to analyze why they would say yes. What would the motivation? What would China motivate Russia motivate them by? What is the ideology which they have, like the same, or why would it happen? We think that, and for that, secondly, we think that China isn't the only place where we can get that. People like all other states that use this fuel don't get it only from China. There are other places, and Russia isn't gonna pay the entire world to like not give us this fuel. Yeah.
All right. Whatever.
Then my question. First, you tell us that for some reason China is such a big risk for our security, but we don't really see a reason why China should prefer one customer instead of two. Having two customers is like a principle in the economy, how to make more money, and I think that's more profitable for China, and I don't see a reason why they shouldn't choose this way.
Estonia is really ideologically different than China and Russia, and China obviously does prefer Russia because Russia can pay off 10 times more than Estonia can, and Russia's ideology matches with China's one. So we think that even if Estonia would be a great customer, we think that China would still choose Russia, because Russia has a communist ideology the same as China does, and they don't want to make a deal with Western country.
Okay, thank you. Your turn.
All right. So you told us about selling the energy and it paying off later in the future. How do you think that? How long do you think that the energy selling will take? How long do you think it takes to actually pay off when the energy itself is kind of cheap?
Well, actually, I think it's not really important how long does it take, but we can bring an analogy here. But building up a nuclear power station is a lot like buying an apartment to give out for rent. You buy it, it's in the beginning it's expensive, but in the long run it pays itself back and it turns at one point into profit. We don't need to analyze how much time does it take, but it would definitely take less time than building a renewable energy station, which would not even bring us any profit, but would bring us more expensive consumer prices. I've already analyzed in our 3 speeches. Thank you.
Thank you. Why does the populism point fall under your side if creating enough wind parks to actually fill our energy needs would take away thousands and hundreds of thousands of people's homes?
I think the fact that the populist parties can say that the power plant can explode or like anything, they can just say anything which is like scary enough for the people. That scary enough for the whole population of Estonia. So we think that they can just use like much more like scary fake news just to like do it rather than just taking away a few people's homes through the renewable energy process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We still haven't gotten a plan from the other team that at all would be a solution to this problem. We find that it is very necessary, especially when we both agree that we have a problem. So I'll tell you our plan again because it seems like they haven't been listening. We would build these nuclear factories on the basis that renewable energy right now isn't effective. It isn't enough to replace fossil fuels, and we find that right now it is very necessary for multiple reasons. We have told you this already, for staying in the EU, for bettering the environment, for many reasons. So let's talk about these nuclear plants. Of course, in the past some accidents have happened, but we find that we have brought out statistics how unlikely it is to happen in Estonia, 0.6%. Plus, we haven't counted in this use of thorium that would decrease this chance even more. So we find that in the end, this point that something might happen is really unlikely and shouldn't be a part of this debate. So let's talk about this China versus Russia problem. We find that, as we have said already, there are many countries with these with thorium or uranium, so we find that we have alternative methods, but also we find that China actually wants to make a profit, even if Russia is like, we find that if they're willing to sell to us in the beginning, if they're making a deal with us in the beginning, they'll keep making that deal. And also we find that this populism point that they have brought just doesn't work in this case. We find that by education, by showing people like hands-on experience that this new method works, that if we count if we put an equation, we find that people care more about staying in the EU, saving the environment than they do about one small nuclear plant. So we find that if people are willing to accept that, then good. And because of those reasons, proposition. Thanks.
See on ka 3 minutit, eks ole?
jah, 2–3 pikaks käes.
Jaa, ei või.
Make it 2 my name.
Let's make it 3 in consequence. Okay, they proposed this whole need for us to cut down on the fossil fuel use, but we don't actually see how that is relevant in this debate. We sell pollution quotas to other countries, thus we actually don't pollute enough to actually use those pollution quotas, thus we have actually pollution quotas to spare, thus the problem doesn't freaking exist. Secondly, we don't see a massive energy crisis in Estonia, right? They have never proven us a massive energy crisis, they're just laughing because they don't really dumb and they don't understand. Secondly, they have told us about this massive populism spring with people being like cast out of their lands to just put out wind-powered turbines. We don't see that ever happening anywhere in Estonia. 50% of the land is forest, and most of those wind turbines are placed in the water where there actually are no people last time I checked. Okay. So they're all there, like the things that they have started this debate on is completely false. It completely lies on our side. Secondly, they haven't really answered us why it isn't more expensive to keep rebuilding those little nuclear factories, which I already explained, which they just didn't give the panel enough information about, which they just led you to misbelieve. Secondly, we actually find that it doesn't make any sense what they're saying about the like the future or the energy safety regarding China and Russia. I brought you plenty examples when China doesn't actually want benefits, it just wants more ideologically aligned things. We see that Russia may not be a communist state like was previously stated, but it definitely aligns better with China than it does align with Estonia. It has done really many things to actually be in alignment with Russia, so we see that it was just supported. Secondly, we see that we don't really have any other countries to buy from, right? They just said that why won't we buy from anyone else? Well, no one else has it enough. Like Canada, USA, they all are already supplying a lot of partners, and all the other countries that are left are like Kazakhstan and Russia, which are not really democracy friendly. They will laugh, but man, it's just true. And finally, we see that they haven't really outweighed or benefited why actually when I am a poor person living in the countryside and now my taxes are going to raise because my country just took a massive debt to actually build those things, why my life will be better when in 30 years or sometime they didn't actually give us any picture of the long run that they're describing, when my taxes will start to go down and I will have cleaner energy, why that will benefit me more when I have actually suffered for so long and I don't want it and I have to live in fear. Thank you.